And then what about, obviously your team does risk analysis.
Mhm.
How do you incorporate the pandemic into a risk analysis profile? What does that look like?
We certainly did that to try to develop this coverage form to say,
Right.
if we sell this, what's the likelihood we're going to get claims and how much should we charge for it? But I would say on a bigger picture thing, we we have been so impressed with how the nonprofits have handled this
Yeah.
that, in fact, I don't know if you know, but this last couple of years, the commercial insurance industry has really failed the nonprofit sector and
How
certain
so?
segments of it. Just when the pandemic was starting, they started to non-renew, increase prices dramatically, and lower limits for most nonprofits across the board. And it was a perfect storm. Now, the reason that they say that they're doing this is because of the reviver statutes, meaning that those who may have been sexually abused, the state are giving them a longer time to file the lawsuits, right?
Okay.
And so the insurance industry, in its typical knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah.
has said, oh, well, that's going to create a lot more claims for us. So therefore, we don't want to insure child serving organizations. We don't want to insure homeless shelters. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want to insure people interacting with other
Mm-hmm.
people, vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
populations.
Mm-hmm.
And but that happened right at the time of the pandemic, and it
Wow.
was so horrible. We frankly, we have probably the best data in the country on claims against nonprofits because we have
Mm-hmm.
30
Well, I
years.
would think.
It's
Yeah.
very good data. We only insure 501(c)(3) nonprofits. And I can say with confidence that we have not seen an increase in sexual abuse claims against nonprofits.
Hmm.
And so all of these allegations really run hollow. They ring hollow to us.
Uh-huh.
We think that insurance companies had made some bad choices that got them into financial difficulties,
Mm-hmm.
and they had some bad claims that they had not anticipated, and so they're using this reviver statute as a reason to run from the market.
And so, but that seems like a big market. So the insurance companies are just running from, or maybe not running, but like they're just trying to push the nonprofits to the side, either by not renewing or increasing the premiums.
Increasing premium or reducing the amount of coverage they will
Coverage.
offer.
Got
Now,
it.
what happens there is a lot of particularly the larger nonprofits have contract requirements. So they might have a contract requirement that says to fulfill your obligation to the county, you have to carry 5 million in limits. Well, they
Mm-hmm.
can't satisfy that contract
Got it.
requirement anymore. And so, yeah, we've grown just dramatically over
Yeah.
the course of the pandemic
Right.
because for us it's serving our mission. I mean,
Yeah.
helping other nonprofits is all we do. So it has
So
been.
let's go back to the pandemic and use everyone's favorite word from last year, pivot. And you alluded to this a little bit earlier around some of the success stories, but I'd love to hear some of the success stories that you've heard of organizations that figured out a new model. Or a new, and it's just amazing. And it's like, and for-profit companies do this as well, but not for profits, as we know, they're, for the most part, they're running on a shoestring budget. The ability to be creative is many times tied to the balance sheet. So and flexible funding, but neither of which many nonprofits have. However, so many organizations have just pivoted and provided new services and all of that. I'd love to hear a little bit as to what you're
Sure.
seeing.
So I will call it not pivot, but innovate. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's what we've seen. We've seen innovation in the nonprofit sector. I mean, everything from realizing that they can't sign checks, right, in person.
Right.
So they immediately will adopt an online check signing and they bookkeeping and that sort of thing. So they make that happen. But in other ways, like trying to figure out if school's not in, right? How do you pay attention to the kids that you were serving in after school? So creating Zoom meetings, right? So that kids can be engaged on a non-school event, right? So
Yeah,
they can celebrate and have parties and that
yeah,
sort
of
of thing over Zoom. It's not the same, but it's
course.
a way to stay connected. Um, I think also, one of the things that we saw right very early is that um, they needed like PPE equipment and that sort of
Right.
thing, and they couldn't get it, right?
Right.
Or they couldn't, they don't have
Nobody
funds.
could get it.
But even if they
Yeah,
could afford, they didn't have the funds to
yeah,
do it, right? Because you have to have discretionary funds.
right.
So we actually immediately at the beginning of the pandemic put up a $500,000 fund,
Awesome.
and we just told our members, look, it's like a simple one-page application, no questions asked. Just tell us what you need it for. And we sent that out. I think it was in a period of 2 months. We just sent out
Awesome.
$500,000 in small grants.
So you mentioned innovation. It leads me to think about like what are the other blessings is such a loaded word, but what are the other blessings as that you see coming from the pandemic for the field? And just to give you a little bit of time to think about this, one thing I'm seeing is organizations kind of doing the leapfrog technology. One, like you should be able to like send a check through ACH or whatever, but
Mhm,
like, hi, welcome to the 21st century. Most organizations now folks are able to do that, and even
mhm,
foundations, you'll be surprised,
mhm.
or maybe not surprised, but anyway. So I feel like now nonprofits and a lot of us, right, just normal everyday Joes and Janes are now connected to Zoom and have much more IT experience. So
Mhm.
and I think that's a good thing, right? Like that's
Mhm.
innovation, that's moving forward and technology. What other benefits are you seeing come from the pandemic vis-a-vis the nonprofit sector?
I guess what I've seen a little bit too is that people taking a little bit of time to reflect
Uh-huh.
and see how close they might be to being the one that needs a food bank.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really having more regard and more respect for the importance of the basic services that nonprofits provide. You just can't stand aside and say, well, I would never need that because so many people have needed it. And
Mm-hmm.
also the importance, I think, of the nonprofit sector when government was not actually able to or was not willing or stepping up, right? And so you just see the benefit of this important sector and also people feeling that their lives need meaning and
Mm-hmm.
turning to the nonprofit sector and saying, I've been working this corporate job for whatever, and it is not satisfying my soul. And
Mm-hmm.
what can I do to help my neighbor? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know there's a lot of divisiveness in our country right now,
Mm-hmm.
but also I see on the flip side a real interest also in the younger people in saying, I'm just not going to get on that hamster wheel again.
Yeah, yeah, I've been noticing that too. And a
Yeah,
lot of folks, as you're saying, coming over from the for-profit side,
yeah.
coming over to the nonprofit side to look for this meaning and purpose.
You
And I
know,
think once, the beginning of the pandemic, when it was like, are we going to live? Like there was a lot of existential kind of thinking going
yes,
on from folks, which, is good, and time to reflect. So,
yes.
yeah.
I know from our perspective, we have hired a lot of new staff
Mm-hmm.
because we're growing so much. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just been wonderful to talk with the candidates. So many of them, we asked them to write a statement before we
Mm-hmm.
interview them of why do you want to work for a nonprofit and why do you want to work with us specifically? And so many of them say, I have all these insurance skills, but I feel like I'm not getting to do what I really want to do and help the customer. I'm kind of tired of just working for the bottom line for somebody
Mm-hmm.
else.
Yeah.
And that is really gratifying to see.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Um, and not all nonprofits are thriving.
No,
And so it's great to point to, the success stories, and I think that's partially what gets us through the day, right?
right.
Um, what are you seeing in terms of organizations, kind of big picture, around some of the organizations or sectors that are having more challenges than others.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Is it, folks that are reliant on buildings or what?
Yeah. That's a little tough for me. I can tell you from our perspective what we're experiencing. It relates a little bit to their insurance as well.
Yeah.
But certainly child serving organizations are really under stress right now. I mean, one, because the insurance industry has fled, and so they're having to pay more and get less, coverage. We're writing a lot of them, but it's a stressful time. They have to spend time kind of making that transition. But also, I think, if you have to keep people in a residential setting, right, that's going to be a really difficult, stressful thing to do on a regular, normal basis, right? And as you said, but with COVID and having to be, all in one space for a long time without interaction, people know how tough this has been on their kids, right?
Yeah.
So just having to homeschool and be home all the time. But these kids, many of them, or even seniors, I mean, think of the seniors and the inability to get out and engage with community. And nonprofits are having to figure out, how to provide that additional, familiar support, right? When they can't get out. Right.
I think of I worked with an organization up in Marin that helped folks with Alzheimer's and dementia, and it was a group setting and all of that. And I just think about them, and it's like, how do they interact with folks that are difficult or challenged to interact with to begin with? So yeah, I think. And then what about like just other characteristics that you're seeing for organizations that are having challenges? Smaller, larger, doesn't matter.
I think
geographies.
I don't think I've seen it in geographies. I think that we have seen a lot of organizations that were strong before the pandemic get a lot stronger. I mean, I think they've gotten a lot more funding from government because they need to provide these services, and they need that help. But we also have seen a fair number of senior executives either take furloughs or significant pay cuts to try to get through it. I mean, which also just shows that there's just so much dedication, but it shouldn't have to be that way. But they've done it. They do whatever is necessary,
month on month
to get by. Yeah. So I would say smaller organizations, the very smallest, say budget size of under 50,000. Many of those just kind of went into mothballs. I mean, they have all volunteer staff. They might have kept in touch via Zoom, but they weren't able to basically do as many services. But now they're coming back out of it.
Awesome.
Right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of new nonprofits start. A lot of new nonprofits start, especially in the civil justice space.
Well, that's our next topic.
Okay.
That's our next topic.